Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome to another video. So we're going to be talking about Season of Discovery again. A bit slow to the punch with this video, so I apologise if it feels a bit rushed, if I miss anything or gloss over anything. Unfortunately, it may happen. But essentially, we are getting a Season of Discovery Phase 3 coming on the 4th of April 2024, and in making this video, this is the day before, so very late to the punch. I've just not had a chance. I just want to start with, in the description below I will link a very good detailed rundown video from the developers at Blizzard going over what's in Season 3. It's about 30 minutes long. It's a really good video and I recommend you watch it. I'll also link some of the blue posts directly in there, so you can glean over the information in more detail at your leisure. So this video is not just talking about what's coming into Phase 3, also some thoughts on what we're getting actually as well. So I always like to spin some of my thoughts onto these either updates or content that we're getting. So it also means I'm not going to go over each point by point, but I want to just kind of gloss over a bit. But again, the links in the description below if you want to go see those. I will say, like many people, including myself, Phase 2 ended up being significantly shorter than we would have anticipated. Not just in terms of the fact that Phase 2 was actually a very short phase, it didn't have a very much the way of content. It really only had three main things: the increase of level cap from 25 to 40, the Stranglethorn Vale PvP event, and obviously Nomaran raid. So they were really the only things. So much so that Blizzard ended up implementing the XP buff so people could level alts. So that's kind of how, in terms of additional content outside of the runes being added in, it didn't have much. So when we say typical Blizzard fashions in some aspects, historically they've taken a long time with patches. So I would say 2023 and 2024 so far, that's been very false. So credit where credit is due, Blizzard has delivered on their patch cadence, and they seem very mindful, at least my impression, they seem very mindful and rather respectful in terms of what we're getting in that patch. I'm hoping they're seeing and are capable of delivering the fact that if they deliver a small patch, it's not going to be a long lasting patch. We're going to get the next content sooner. And in Dragonflight, we can see their patch cadence has been generally fantastic. They've been on the ball with content and things haven't felt very long. And I would say each of the patches in modern World of Warcraft have been about the equivalent to each other. So they've been about the same sort of time scales. But I think Season Discovery with Phase 2 was very much obvious with the lack of content, but let's try to think why that could be the case. Now, I'm very strongly under the impression that Blizzard was never expecting the success story that this is. But the fact that there were so many people trying to play classic Season Discovery at the beginning of Phase 1 and still continue to play going forward in Phase 2, I would probably say in Phase 2 we saw a drop off of players because there was a lack of content. So it seems like, in my honest opinion, the patch cycles and cadence weren't meant to be very big to start with. So it seemed like they've taken Phase 3 and possibly going forward more serious and more expectant of really they have a large player base hungry for content to do, so they're trying to deliver. So there is a chance and possibility in this idea of what we're getting in Phase 3 might have been some of Phase 4 inclusions, or actually maybe later down the line. So they brought some of it forward, such as some of the content we're getting, because the scope we're getting in Phase 3 seems far beyond for something of what is they still deem as temporary type of content. If you look at the video that Blizzard did, which is fantastic, the amount of effort, the amount of detail that went into that production just to make that video was very high, and it's actually at the level of AAA MMO production for their patches. This is something we would see for Dragonflight and other full-scale MMOs for their own patches. To me, this is far beyond the expectation of this game mode of Season Discovery. This is still classic at heart. This is still a lot of the same game a lot of us has played, and there's still the classic era servers as well, so they still exist. So to have something like this was just pushing the boundary. So we'll see how far they can stretch it and see what more ideas they can go going forward, but we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's talk about Phase 3. So what we're getting in Phase 3, we're getting an increase in the level cap. So we're going from 40 to 50. We're getting new runes for all the classes. I think they're saying in their updates about 6 per class. Now this obviously, the strength of those and utility of those will depend of how they've already begun those classes. So for example, I'm predominantly playing Mage, and they have to share their runes between actually DPSing and also the fact that you can heal as a mage, and that's the route I'm trying to go down to, is mage healing. And I'll try garner some of the known ones that Blizzard have actually mentioned, but their video covers some potential rules we're getting. I think we're getting them anyway, but everything's subject to change. Obviously we'll be seeing some balancing patches, and I think they've put some in there, and they're probably not completely full, or we may get some further updates down the line as the phase continues. But one thing, at least from a mage perspective, I think from a DPS perspective for mage, they're on point. So it's actually pretty good and fine. But from the healing perspective, I do think they need to do a bit more, where if classes have like the roles they never had before in the normal game, so like for mage, rogues, shamans and warlocks, to sort of tune and balance those runes out a bit more for warlock tanking. I think they are actually tuning that, but I do want them to address mage healing because it's not that efficient. So I'm hoping they can address the efficiency, because I think as a toolkit it's kind of there, and maybe when we go into the further down the talents with the additional 10 points, we perhaps can see some sort of additional and inclusion to that. Obviously I'm not asking for anything to be broken, I'm not asking to be overpowered. I don't believe mages should have access to the powerful DPS spells and their healing simultaneously. There needs to be that what do we call it, trade-off, and we're getting dual specs, so I'm hoping that can address that so that you can actually go down the healing route and have that stronger and more efficient, and obviously you can switch to your primary DPS role. Now we're probably going to come into what is the meat of Phase 3. Now this is probably the surprise inclusion, which is the Nightmare Incursion. So to me, despite reading the post from Blizzard, this feels like this iteration of content is quite brand new, mechanically speaking, to the game, not just for Classic but also for Modern Warcraft, though there is sprinkle of Modern Warcraft into this, and I'll explain that a little later. But essentially the Nightmare Incursions are us entering the Nightmare Portal, or the Emerald Dream Portals that's scattered around Azeroth. So Duskwood, Ashenvale, I think Ashenvale? Yeah, Ashenvale, Ferrolas and Hinterlands. So this is quite Kalimdor bias, actually. Very Kalimdor bias. and very alliance kind of favoured in those zones, if I'm completely honest, but getting ahead of ourselves. So this is a new PvE zone content. So as we're saying, zones are going to be instant content, so they're going to be separated from the world itself. However, they're not queuable. You still have to go through the world in order to get to those zones, where they're located, then move your way in. But once you're in this content, they're separated from the rest of the world content, which I don't know how I feel about that. I can see why systematically and in terms of system engineering they would do that. It's probably the quickest way of adding content without changing the area around it and bug testing that. If people just go for an instance portal, then that'll be the easiest way of delivering that content. But one of the things that makes Classic what it is that what you do in the world, everyone is around you. Have all of these players being around you, like either they're just leveling, they're just kind of doing their own thing, they're doing their gathering, they're doing whatever they are doing, they are there. So it's nice to have that kind of living and breathing world that you move across and people interact with, to have that class experience, but and that world, those world events, to have them that separation. I don't know, to me that feels a bit controversial, but that's just an opinion. We'll see how it goes. But if you want to look into more details of what those pieces of content will entail, please read the blue post to go in more detail. But essentially it should be a way of being able to level in those content. There's going to be elite quests, which I think might be daily quests or something like that, maybe weekly, so you could do it on a repeated nature. This is something that they did say in the video. This is something you can do on a repeated scale. So I think there's going to be currencies in there that you could probably get some gear and some items, so it's going to have that persistence. And I hope the way they deliver this piece of content is going to have persistent throughout the phase and hopefully future phases. So if they can do something similar and just add that as it goes on. But it seems like the way they're handling the portals in those specific locations is interesting. This is what I mean by new mechanically. So when I was originally seeing that video, I was strongly under the impression that no matter which of the 4 portals you go in, you would go into a collective instance and they were just there dotted around because that's probably where people are going to be doing their questing. However, Blizzard has said that these portals are going to have level separations. So Duskwood is going to be starting from level 25, and those in Ashen Vale and the one in Ashen Vale, will be level 40, and those in Feralus and Hinterlands will be level 50 content. So Duskwood and Ashen Vale's content will be people leveling from those respective levels from 25 and 40. So you'll have something to do which will give something very different to the mundane questing and dungeon experience. And it'll just allow you just to get on with something. So it's nice to have that kind of variety, so it's good to see. But the way they're handling that is very interesting. I'm going to assume because of Feralus and Hinterlands being level 50 content, they're going to be share the same pool. And the reason why I'm saying this is sprinkling modern Warcraft, we do have stuff in Dragonflight which is very similar to the way they're handling this, such as the primal thingy in I forgot, it's where you go through the time portals or whatever it is, which happens every half an hour to an hour, and you zone into another zone entirely backwards in time and do something. So I'm going to imagine it's going to be a variation of that, but they seem to be focusing on a quest-based system, so I'm assuming this is going to be quest-driven, daily or weekly, and there's possibly going to be changes in that. So there's probably going to be some grinding experience with bosses here and there popping around, but we'll see. despite the instance nature, it still makes you get out the city, so it's still technically world content to me, because you still have to get off your butt in some respect and make your way out there, so you can't just have a lobby experience, so it still avoids that, and I still want them to avoid it. And it seems they really want to stick with group style content with these, so it's really kind of imperative that we sort of address how classic and modern Warcraft addresses what they mean by quest style. So with quest driven, when it comes to group driven content in classic Warcraft, you typically do want to be in a group. They're not really soloable. In modern Warcraft, when I say something's a bit tougher or it's group based, it's typically soloable in my experience. You can build yourself in a way you can handle a lot of content solo in World of Warcraft, but in Classic they tend to stick with that. If something needs a group, you're not going to do so well by yourself, so I think it's nice to encourage group content in stuff like that. So we'll have to see. I'm curious if it will go beyond, if it will allow you to do that as like a raid, or it's strictly maximum 5 parties, because it'd be nice to be able to, I don't know, go as a group of like 10 and just have a bit of a laugh doing it. But how good it will be, we will have to see, and we don't have to wait long for that at this time of the video. I will certainly mostly give it a go, and if it's fun, I'll spend a bit more time in it, and it's just a good way, like I said, to spread over your leveling process, give it a bit more variety in how you level, how you gain gear, and whatever else you can get into there as well. Because doing dungeons as well can be a bit of a problematic. There's always groups looking for people, but they're typically always looking for tanks and healers, or predominantly tanks really, which never changes. This will definitely help with the issue that I had when I was leveling my mage from 25 to 40. The classic experience is pretty brutal when it comes to how generous it is with experience. Now, I got to a point where when I was reaching level 40, I was very nearly running out of viable quests. I was starting to be left with either level 40 quests themselves, but I wanted to retain those for when my four thoughts were from phase 3 to level from 40 to 50. That was the original plan, to keep them safe, and I did. And it meant it was very difficult to do any other quest, and it was difficult finding dungeons to have groups going often. So it's nice to see something added to address that, just to sort of prop that up a little bit more and maybe more fun. Because some of these quests just that I was left with were difficult, but no, I don't mean the target was difficult. It's either really low drop rate item with so few mobs, and there's loads of people doing it as well, so mob tagging is awful. They were also located, either the quest point was in difficult to reach areas, so that it just meant getting there and questing around it was actually the bigger challenge than the actual quest itself, unless the journey itself was deliberately done, which I believe is the case knowing Blizzard. So it's nice to be able to not only have that on your quest journal. It's nice to have a little bit more. And the other meat of the content is obviously we're getting a new raid. Now, this is Sunken Temple, or rather known as Temple of Atal Hakar. Now, we were very much expecting that dungeon to be the new raid. It just feels like a raid. It looks like a raid far more than any of the dungeons in that particular level range. But what we weren't expecting was for this to be the inclusion of being 20-man raid as opposed to 10. So that's quite a big jump from going 10 to 20. So I'm surprised they didn't have maybe be 15 or have that at 20, but also had an additional dungeon at the raid, and that was 10-man, just to have a bit more content, bit more variety, bit more spice in it, and just sort of, it will help groups that have only had 10 people they run with be able to still do relevant max level content, or the max level 50 content, but still as a group of 10 while they find another group of 10 people to do the 20-man. So this is where that social curve and grouping is going to be really, really awful. Having that massive change is going to be very it's going to cause massive ramifications if raiding teams haven't tried to adjust to going 20-man while they're finishing up Nomaran as 10. But why do I think they're going 20? Well, we're getting more runes, and we're also getting classes getting another 10 points of talents, which means, and also additional spells as well, or skills. So we're going to have stronger spec classes going into at level 50 because of this, and gear in general becomes stronger. So as the specs become more specialized, it also means we kind of need more bodies to take over certain roles or certain skills, that if you want to tune level 50 content for level 50 skill sets, you kind of need people to have certain skills going into that. At least that's my impression of it. So going 20 will give you an easier opportunity to make sure you have those included classes. Until we see that content drop as 20-man, we'll see how it actually goes. I still think being like 15-man would have been a bit better going with that, just so it's less of a harsh curve going from 10 to 20. Finding 5 people would have been easier. It also means it keeps the pool of raiders a little bit more open as well. Having 20 really sort of drinks up the pool and does lockouts significantly more. And I think they mentioned as well they're going to be tuning the gearing types, the stats, and the amount of loot we get to be better tuned. So this is, we'll see what we really get when we are in the raid, but I kind of hope they address some of the problems Classic typically has, is that it's really horrible gearing if you're a caster. Now, they've kind of revamped some of the gearing from the 25 onwards, but anything below that is dead awful. You can only get intellect gear, but even then that's not on everything, and it's spell power you need. You don't feel more powerful when you're a caster, but if you're a melee, you feel more powerful. And if you look at a lot of the weapon types they get, some of them are proc effects that are not even raid gear, they're just dungeon gear. And we don't have anything with that kind of fun flavour anywhere else outside of the raid. Like Nomaran has a interesting staff, but outside of that it's very boring. So I think what I've noticed with Season Discovery, there is a lot of melee players, and I think kind of that, outside of like how strong melee can be, it's just better gear. Like, you can be stronger sooner because the gear is actually there and available. So I'm hoping they can address that particular aspect of gearing and its tuning. They also talk about a bit of the raid in that video as well, so again, check it out. We see some updates to Stranglethorn Vale PvP event. I believe they're kind of overhauling a little bit of the currency you can obtain, or they're just up tiering because of the new level cap, but there's going to be new items included for that. Now, I haven't really been doing that piece of content, so I'm not the best person to really talk about it or have any thoughts other than just it's a nice inclusion of content. They talk about how the dungeons that are tuned from level 40 onwards, Zul'Farrak, Uldaman, Maradon, and Blackrock Depth are going to have their dungeon loot updated to be tuned for Season of Discovery, so I'm hoping we get to see what I talked about earlier, especially with caster gear being better tuned for what they are, and we're getting more variety of useful gear that we can upgrade to, and I'm hoping for nicer weapon procs as well. Dual talent option. So this is going to be included. Now, we saw this originally introduced in World of Warcraft in Wrath of the Lich King some point in. It was very useful, and I think with Season of Discovery, if you play a rogue, if you play a mage, if you play a warlock, trying to spec specifically to be like, say, tank or healer in those respects, then you need to really talent very specifically to make them as strong as possible. So you can't hybrid your talents too much. You really need to actually cater them in a particular way. And you can take away from your output from either your tank heal or your DPS. So having that dual talent option is much stronger here because of just how much variety of your builds you can have. And you know, the fact that you can be a warlock tank, shaman tank, rogue tank, mage healer just helps with those particular pools to really open that up and just allow people to fulfill certain roles when we're doing in dungeon or anything like that. Just it helps increase certain pools where required if players are comfortable with it. So how do we conclude this? Phase 3 obviously is something we knew was coming. It's a welcome addition. It's coming far sooner than expected. For some people, they were not ready for this. I'm already seeing quite a broad prep video, and I believe some of these prep videos are last minute as well from some creators, and because this is far sooner than we were expecting, we're seeing the promises of additional systematic changes with gearing updates. It just feels like the team behind Season Discovery is just going full steam ahead, and with this level of dedication and passion, and the team from across of the whole of WoW team really, having this level of content addition is really, really good. I can't stress how strong the nature of this patch is. This is what we kind of expect at minimum for Modern Warcraft, and we see full MMOs that have that level of content patch delivered, and this is just a classic Warcraft. This is just what Blizzard deem as a temporary game mode that will go away at some point. They're putting this amount of effort in, and it has to be praised. I still want them to continue expanding this game mode. I want it to be more of a ongoing fixture and just see how they could have taken World of Warcraft and just see how some of these experimentations can benefit the franchise as a whole, especially for Modern Warcraft. I really honestly believe what's happening in Season Discovery is assisting with Modern Warcraft being at like, how much risk can we take? What sort of mindset, how do we think about adding this content in? One thing, so they said they are keeping the 50% XP buff going forward from 40 to 49. I believe this is the case, and I hope that is. Season Discovery is not exactly the same as Classic, so I believe having those changes is positive. Not to mention it makes the pacing a lot more fluid and runs into the less risk of running out of quests if that's predominantly what you do. So to me it's a positive, and it also means you spend less time in a questing zone, so it should make people who are really fast leveling much further ahead. Intermediate levels a little bit ahead, and if you're a slow leveler you're behind, so it should help those who level quickly leave those zones faster. So it should help with that kind of spread. I will still want them to include riskier type of overworld content that is an instance or separate from the rest of the world. To me, this is a very positive aspect of Classic. I want to keep going forward. What they did with the Stranglethorn Veil event for its PvP, how they utilized the virtually all parts of the zone is brilliant. Something I haven't seen in a long time. It's not something within a zone, localizing a zone, it's utilizing the whole zone to its advantage. And I think that's amazing. I would love to see a PvE iteration of that, however they can do it. Now the next bit I really want to sort of clarify. I really want them to add a looking for group tool, but not a lobby queue tool. I simply want them to have a in-game interface to find other players to do particular content, instead of just spamming trade chat or having a LFG chat panel. This is just easier and cleaner and doesn't take away from looking for a group manually that you have to find your way. Having cleaner UI doesn't take away from the experience, which also leads into the next aspect. I will love for them to add the base UI they have in Dragonflight into this. A lackluster UI doesn't make for a Classic experience. That was just because that's all they could think of at the time. The Classic UI is awful. The way you can't change things around very easily is awful, and it really pushes you to use add-ons, and I have no issues with UI add-ons whatsoever, but it is a pain that when you're coming from modern World of Warcraft to this, you feel very compelled to like get parity on that experience. So I think they really should include the modern UI with that configuration, because it'll be just nicer to be able to configure it and just make it look a little nicer. And they have the updated graphics for Classic, which you can toggle between the very old school style of the way it looked and the modern version. So I think if they could do that with the UI, we'll be fine. It doesn't give you more of an advantage considering you can get an add-on. Guys, if you made it this far in the video, thank you. Please leave a comment, leave a like, and please give a subscription. I would love to do more of these videos, and I'd love to hear more of you guys' train of thoughts, what you think of content patches like this. Not as Blizzard as a company. Please let me know what you think about what they're doing to the content, how they're adding it, and what you think their ideas are behind it. Till the next video, see you guys.